I want to address the issue that's in the headlines right now.
GOP's new it girl, Tulsi Gabbard, is finding out her new party isn't as supportive as she thought they would be.
I'm joining the Republican Party.
Turns out the party of Trump isn't falling in line quite as much as Tulsi would like, despite support from totally not insane senators like Tom Cotton.
Probably pretty painful to have their skin ripped off, but I think that's the way we'd handle it in Arkansas, and I would encourage most people take matters in their own hands.
I'm thinking that's a little over the top.
Given the state of the Senate, Gabbard's dream of becoming spy master as the head of the Department of National Intelligence is all but certain, but that doesn't mean some of Tulsi's skeletons aren't coming out of the closet in the process. If you're enjoying this coverage and what we do here, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Tulsi Gabbard may be one of the Democrats' greatest shames. A longtime dino who made a fool of herself nationally by running as a centrist in the 2020 election and ultimately crashing and burning.
Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard dropping out of the presidential race and endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden.
Then, after spending the Biden years courting the Republican Party and becoming an independent, she finally did the most unsurprising thing ever and joined the Republican Party during Trump's campaign in order to secure herself a hefty nomination.
That I'm joining the Republican Party.
Let me ask you about former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. You picked her to be the Director of National Intelligence.
Right. And her plans seem to have worked, as Trump sneaks Tulsi in as the director of the DNI beneath some more distracting picks like Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth.
Trump's choice for Attorney General has already caused an uproar in Washington. Gaetz was the subject of a House ethics probe into claims of child sex trafficking.
This comes as part of Trump's strategy to gut and replace the corrupt and shady intelligence agency with an even more corrupt and orange-shaded one. This comes as revenge for his last time in office, when intelligence officials questioned and criticized his decisions, ironically, including Tulsi Gabbard herself.
She condemned the strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
Trump has committed an act of war. He has pushed our country into a state of war with Iran, a war that will prove to be far more devastating and costly than anything that we saw with the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. It'll make those wars look like a picnic.
As former Director of Intelligence Susan Gordon put it, Trump had no foundation or framework to understand what the limitations of intelligence are, what the purpose of it was, and the way that we discuss it. Tulsi then seems like a logical pick for Trump. Being young and media savvy, she garners a lot of support from the base.
Newly nominated Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Well, first of all, congratulations, Tulsi. We're all very proud of you.
As well as her history in the United States National Reserves, having been deployed to Iraq.
But according to her book, she never really did anything in Iraq. She was just on a base. She wasn't dealing with patients. She had that kind of an administrative role dealing with paperwork. She never, apparently, she doesn't talk about it if she did, but according to her book and the comments she's made, she never even left the main base. She never went through the gates, never went on a patrol, things like that.
Most interestingly, though, has been her most recent deployments to Africa as commander in the Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Unit. Literally PSYOPs. Because of this, many Republicans in the Trump sphere support her nomination, including Trump himself, who has recently come out in defense of Gabbard.
In 2017, she had 2 secret meetings with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Do you have questions or concerns about those meetings?
No. And he's got bigger problems right now.
Well, do you think it makes it hard for her?
His country is collapsing.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it compromises her ability to handle that?
I met with Putin. I met with President Xi of China. I met with Kim Jong-un twice. Does that mean that I can't be president?
Well, when you were president, they weren't secret meetings.
Look, people meet. All these people meet. I mean, I see some of the most dishonest people. I'll tell you.
Despite her use of Russian disinformation, and her repeated defense of Putin in the war in Ukraine.
The Ukrainian president is frankly exposing that there is no democracy.
Maidan didn't bring Ukraine closer to democracy.
You hear President Biden say, well, this is Putin's war. This is Putin's fault. The United States and some of these European NATO countries are fueling this war.
NATO started exploring the lands close to us. And that became an obvious threat.
Arguing that the only way to peace is to give Putin at least some of what he wants.
The only way that this war ends is through some kind of a negotiated treaty. That's it. That's been true from the very beginning.
Does that mean giving up Ukrainian land?
It means, I think, both sides, like in all treaties, will end up having to surrender some portion of what they want in order to achieve that peace treaty.
Luckily for Tulsi, she has the backing of Republican heavyweights, like the infallible Lindsey Graham. Having his support is a bit like being friends with a malaria mosquito, but To each their own. Hundreds of Republican veterans have also come out in support of Tulsi. But it's not that she was just skeptical of things that made her a target of folks like Axelrod that are making jokes about the Gabbard-Assad connection. Former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger is also slinging mud at Tulsi for her support of the Syrian dictator. And former Trump security advisor John Bolton has decided to crawl out from under the bridge he usually forces weary travelers to solve riddles on to urge senators not to endorse Gabbard.
Announcement of Tulsi Gabbard to be the director of national intelligence, he's sending a signal that we have lost our mind.
Tulsi's signature flip-flopping style is put on full display in her involvement with the dictator Bashar al-Assad, whose 14-year reign of terror on the Syrian people came to an end this weekend. Tulsi has been criticized for meeting with Assad and potentially revealing the identity of a Syrian defector to the dictator.
We were all really worried about Tulsi, and the fact is, the Republican Democratic staffers were the ones that even came to me first saying, you know, SETF has been custodians of the Caesar file for a while. The anonymity and the protection of Caesar is paramount because Russia wants to kill him, Iran wants to kill him, Assad wants to kill him.
What were they worried was going to happen? This is what I want people to understand.
We were all really terrified, especially the staffers, that she may take a photo of him, or maybe even record his voice, or identify anything about his identity and bring that information back to America's adversaries, whether that be Putin or Assad.
These concerns were paramount even after Gabbard had publicly said that Assad is a brutal dictator because she had also expressed interest in working with the Syrian president.
Obviously, Bashar al-Assad is responsible for thousands of deaths and millions of people being displaced during this 5-year-long civil war. Did you have any compunctions about meeting with somebody like that, giving him any sort of enhanced credibility because a member of the United States Congress would meet with someone like that?
Whatever you think about President Assad, the fact is that he is the president of Syria. In order for any peace agreement, in order for any possibility of a viable peace agreement to occur, there has to be a conversation with him.
At that time, Tulsi Gabbard was a member of the House, so it's uncertain what peace she could garner with Assad. Instead, she seemed to simply throw dispersions on the claims of chemical weapon use by the Assad regime.
The U.S. and the CIA should stop this illegal and counterproductive war to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad.
I have not seen that independent investigation occur and that proof presented showing exactly what happened. And there are a number of theories that are out there on exactly what occurred that day. After an independent investigation for these horrific chemical weapons attacks, I'll be the first one to denounce him, to call him a war criminal, and to call for his prosecution in the International Criminal Court. Make sure that those consequences are there.
Well, Assad was confirmed to be responsible for the chemical attacks all the way in 2013. So one has to wonder why Tulsi still refused to outright say that Assad was responsible, instead opting for this language. Quote, I think that the evidence needs to be gathered, and, as I have said before, if there is evidence that he has committed war crimes, he should be prosecuted as such. Despite her outright refusal to condemn the actions of a regime that has kept children born and held in captivity, she is right about one thing. The rebels who overthrew the Assad regime are no saints, many of which have ties to ISIS and al-Qaeda. But there is hope of change in Syria, with the leader of the rebel group projecting an image of moderate peace.
Syrian rebel leader Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who's been on the U.S. terror watch list since 2013. Significant portions of al-Jawlani's group maintain strong links to ISIS.
A former al-Qaeda member. He's got a $10 million bounty on his head. Okay, so we've got a former al-Qaeda guy in charge now. What does he have planned for the new Syria? I'm assuming it's some Taliban-esque, brutal, fundamentalist dystopia.
There must be a legal framework that protects and ensures the rights of all, not a system that serves only one sect.
I ask God Almighty that this be a conquest free of revenge, but a conquest entirely of mercy and love.
Jawlani's purported transformation to a more benevolent governance gives me hope.
Tulsi Gabbard, for her part, has not said anything in regard to the fall of Assad, except to stand behind Daddy Trump on whatever mindless position he may have on Syria.
I stand in full support and wholeheartedly agree with the statements that President Trump has made over these last few days with regards to the developments in Syria. It's one of the many reasons why I appreciate President Trump's leadership and his election, where he is fully committed, as he has said over and over, to bringing about an end to wars, demonstrating peace through strength.
Only time will tell if Tulsi stays committed to her opposition to regime change wars, now that the regime that she likes is no longer the one in power.